Hey everybody, welcome to Conejo Valley Visionaries, a new podcast spotlighting the people and stories behind some of your favorite Conejo Valley small businesses. I'm your host, Christina Denstead. In today's episode, we're talking to Drew Pletcher, one of the co-founders of Oak and Iron Cocktail Bar in Thousand Oaks. Drew's path to opening Oak and Iron was not a straight line. From film studies in undergrad to practicing law, his career moves along the way were not the typical journey to owning a bar, but have a common thread, storytelling. In our conversation, Drew shares how a job at Woodranch during law school reinforced the importance of hospitality, how the idea for Oak and Iron evolved due to some of the city's restrictions, and how he supports other entrepreneurs navigating the complicated permitting process of opening a small business. I love this conversation because Drew shines a light on the technical side of opening a business, which I found extremely valuable. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Drew Pletcher. Welcome, Drew. Thank you for joining me on Conejo Valley Visionaries. I am so pleased to meet you and learn about your story. I am a huge fan. We connected because of Oak and Iron, which is like the best cocktail bar in the Conejo Valley, in my opinion, and one of my favorite haunts. But I'm excited to hear about your story and how you got there and what you're working on now. So we like to start from the very beginning here at Conejo Valley Visionaries. So what did you study in school? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I grew up really wanting to, with a love of film and television. And I actually grew up in Indiana. I grew up in Elkhart, which is a small town. It's about 45,000 people, right near South Bend, Notre Dame, about 5 or 10 miles or so from the Michigan border, just to kind of place it on a map. But I grew up loving film and loving television. And I had my grandmother, who's now 104, we grew up watching old movies, and, you know, I'm a Hollywood kind of classics guy throughout. And, it ended up leading me to move to California in the first place, which was to study film at, Cal State Northridge. So.
Okay. Interesting. Was there a particular genre that drew you in, or was it the classics with your grandmother?
Well, it was probably to start. She loved all the musicals, kind of the classic musicals, and, you know, the Singing in the Rains, but from there, I took to the old westerns of Hollywood, the John Ford directed, John Wayne, you know, Rough and Tough. Westerns. And I remember watching those time and time again. I think I really started watching them mainly because my grandmother wouldn't let me watch anything else that a kid, you know, growing up in the 90s would want to watch,
Sure.
except these kind of classic movies. But really kind of led me to take a leap of faith in what I'd call probably the hardest thing I've ever done, which was to move from Indiana to LA without knowing anybody, by myself at 18, like the craziest thing to do. And I'm appreciative of that, looking back, because it really, it set me up for making a lot of harder decisions down the line a lot easier, because, you know, once you do a hard situation once, other decisions by comparison are a little bit easier to do.
I love that perspective. And it's so true. Something that felt hard at one point now is set a new bar. So, you know, you can do up to that and probably continue to push yourself. So at Northridge, what were you studying specifically? Film? What did you want to do with film there?
A great question. No, it was film and screenwriting and okay. Television. Just get me in on any film set, TV set, anything I could get my hands on. I was interested in, and ended up doing some internship work, and graduated. Oh man, so long ago. I almost don't want to talk about how long ago it's been. But
there's no ages here.
But no, from there I started working. I was working at Universal right after graduation, and this was during kind of the heyday of the independent film movement of like the mid 2000s, and it all. Circumstances changed in my life really when the '08 kind of crash happened, like for so many businesses and people that were affected. my boss at the time had gotten laid off, and Universal had sold some of their smaller companies that were underneath them. And, through just a whole shifting of things, as I remember walking out kind of on the last day, and, I looked around at what who Universal kept, because, they laid off many, but kept a few. And I saw that, it's kind of a running joke, but I saw that, they kept people with some kind of initials after their last name. They had a JD, they had an MBA, they kept the higher educated folks. And it seemed to be, as walking out, it kind of took to that real quick and noticed. And that kind of led me to decide to want to try law school and go to law school and try another bar, for lack of a bad joke there. But
I appreciate it. Yes. What an adept observation to notice who was staying and who was going, and that put you on your next path. So did you then from there just go and pursue a law degree?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was a transition, right? Because when you get a arts degree, I mean, film and television, it's a Bachelor of Arts. You don't have, and I didn't take any logic or reasoning classes in school, and it really comes down to law school. Really comes down to in the what is it, the LSAT, training your brain on how to do logic and reasoning and play these, they call them games, but they're torture devices for anybody who's ever tried to take this test. But it was about training my brain and retraining my brain at that point on how to do these things. So I actually went out and bought, kind of every training book I could under the sun, just to begin trying to understand what this LSAT test was, and began studying for it. But at the same time, that's where I began kind of getting into the hospitality industry and the food and beverage industry, and worked at, it was Woodranch in Northridge. Kind of where I started.
Another is the Conejo Valley founded restaurant, correct? Aren't
exactly.
They
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right in Westlake.
Yeah, sure. So I love that connection. So were you working as a server there, or what was your first entree?
I started as, I very much have the odd personality of being able to wanting to just get in and learn everything I can about what I do. And so when I came in and I started, like many, I started as a host, just getting people to their seats. And from there, picked up, I even picked up bar back shifts and busser shifts, and just worked and saved as much money as I could, and eventually worked my way up to where I could start as a server. And then also, eventually got behind the bar and started bartending, as well as I did catering, and I think I probably picked up a management shift along the way at some point. But it just was, I was fascinated by the people aspect of kind of the hospitality industry. And I enjoy, the things I enjoy about it is just getting, at the time was just getting behind a bar and talking to people and getting to know people and regulars. And you'd be surprised at how many people, come in and want to use the bartender as the proverbial therapist, but it's
I'm guilty of that.
Aren't we all, right? Everybody has their kind of haunts, but through that I'm able to really understand a little bit more about myself, and that I like people, I like helping people, I like talking to people. But I understand kind of that guest service, and what people appreciate is, yes, they want to go out and they want to have good food, and food, obviously the quality of food is kind of number one, but number two is you can forgive a lot of maybe mistakes along the way with food if you have great service, and you put the guest first, and you fix mistakes before they happen, and make sure that time and time again guest has the best experience possible. And that to me was the takeaways from that, and applying them to law has been really pretty easy, because it's just really telling a different kind of story. It's guest service, but you have a client now that you're handling. So there's kind of you can take all of that, and at the time I was taking it and just kind of learning as much as I could, and learning how I responded to situations, and I think that's made me a better person kind of along the way, and kind of led to what Oak and Iron ended up becoming. Not to jump ahead.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you took it as you applied your hospitality skills and learnings to law, where I was thinking you might apply the logic and reasoning part of it, which is wild that they don't teach you in school those unless you are going maybe into law, but apply that to a hospitality service, which I imagine also is so like you have to be on your feet thinking about solutions and logic and like getting to that. So both sides of your brains, like both parts of those could apply to either hospitality or to law.
But to agree with your point, I certainly think a lot of that, hospitality industry, for anybody who's worked in a restaurant before, it's putting out 5 fires at once, and how do you prioritize them, and get out orders and make sure everybody's happy at the same time. I looked at that as saying, ultimately it's guest hospitality first, and then within all of that kind of component is that logic and reasoning, because you're putting out multiple fires, and how do you prioritize them, and how do you get 5 different things for 5 different people all at once. And to credit the good servers and the bartenders and managers out there, it's like the people that have had success in the hospitality industry master that skill. And we all know the difference, right? When you go into a Starbucks or a cafe, and there's good people behind the bar and they're getting drinks out quickly. And then there's others that just can't figure out how to prioritize 5 different orders. It's like, we know what that experience is like from both sides.
Totally. So were you at Woodranch for your full law school terms, or did you move around a little bit?
I was, let's see, I think I was Woodranch for about 6 or 7 years, because it was just kind of transitioning out of the film industry and kind of figuring out what the next steps are. And I had thought about law school and diving into the test, and then they really only give you they do the LSATs, I think, at least at the time I took it, I think it was like 3 times a year. So you have to also kind of pick a test and then prep for it. And I ended up taking it a couple times, just thinking I could do a little bit better the second time. So it was a long road to get into law school, but I ended up staying probably through my first year of law school, which is probably the worst decision you could make as a 1L in law school. You don't need to be doing anything else. You need to be studying in the library. For me, it just wasn't possible. Had to work and had to self-sustain, but we made it too. But that ended up, I left Woodranch when I actually moved from Northridge to out here to at the time it was a condo in Westlake Village.
Okay.
So.
And did you end up going to law school out here?
Yeah, I went to Southwestern Law School. It's downtown LA in Koreatown.
Okay, great. So maybe if you did it again, you would ideally not have to work during that first year, but you obviously made it through your program and then ended up pursuing the practicing law, which I know a lot of people don't necessarily do that after they graduate. So you decided to pursue law and currently are a practicing lawyer. And I'm curious then how you also kept hospitality going, but is that correct?
So yeah, no, absolutely correct. Shortly after I graduated in 2014, I got a job working for an employment law firm, helping employees, essentially, plaintiff side, with their rights and at the time also, as I mentioned, I moved out to Westlake and kind of began getting involved in the Conejo Valley community. And it's interesting how I ended up how Oak and Iron came to be. Very early seeds of it was how I began my involvement with the city of Thousand Oaks. And I've been pretty involved with them since probably 2015, and it all began from when I first got out to Westlake, I sent, at the time, Jackie Irwin who was our assembly member, now assembly member. I sent her a cold call email, just a cold email out of the blue. This is somebody who had moved from Northridge in the San Fernando Valley, and everything that we know about the Valley, and hear from our community about how we don't want to turn into the Valley. And I completely agree. Moving out here, I go, this is a great community. Like, the Conejo Valley is just a fantastic, well-designed, like, it must have taken a lot of really specific skill set to be able to lay out a community like this, and really where you can hike and then go get lunch and go do so many amazing things, and shop and eat and go to breweries. And so I sent Jackie Irwin an email and just kind of said, at the time she was mayor, I said, would you sit down with me and just teach me about this? And she graciously said yes. And we met and began talking about the community. And I said, well, at the time, being in law school, I said, I didn't want to do entertainment law. It really came down to, I wanted to focus on kind of public policy and government work. So it was kind of an area I was interested in. And she met with me, and we had a great discussion and conversation, and introduced me to a lot of the city, then city council members, Joel Price and Andy Fox, a few of the storied folks who have buildings now named after them, theaters now named after them, I should say. But it was a great conversation, but it got me involved in the local community. And then when you kind of fast forward me, I had the ability to sit on the traffic commission and the planning commission while I was also practicing law, and learned about the Boulevard specific plan for the city of Thousand Oaks, and kind of the big dream that the city and the city council have had for businesses to be able to come to the Boulevard and open up nightlife. And kind of the fear that I had heard so much along the way was this fear that we're going to turn into LA if we allow, bars, and we allow nightlife, and we allow, we're going to be the West Side. We're going to be, I heard a lot of those comparisons, and I just didn't think, on a personal level, I just didn't think that was going to be true. In the back of my head, I kind of told myself that, no, I think you can open up a nightlife spot without having it turn into things that we don't want. I agree. But at the same time, I also talked to so many in our community that were sick of taking $150 Uber rides down to Santa Monica to go enjoy a night out. They were saying, I want kind of a nightlife spot. And, at the time I'd gotten together with my business partners, and we were first discussing opening up a brewery and kind of a pizza component. We had learned that, at the time, Tarantula Hill was still being conceptualized. And, we began kind of talking to folks along Thousand Oaks Boulevard, property owners. And we learned very quickly that, they had about 6 to 9 months on us in terms of development and scale and looking at spots. And, when you're kind of sitting there looking at a business plan, but then that your competition already has a space leased, and, they're looking at development and hiring contractors, you got to kind of ask yourself, how do you want to, what do you want to do? Do you want to just
pivot or figure out what?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Is do you pivot? Do you pivot? Do you just walk away? Do you ban the idea, or do you think about other ideas, or what can you do? And it was weird at the time, and I almost had forgotten about it. The space that Oak and Iron sits now, a little Thousand Oaks history, is that building, and then there's a kind of an outdoor barbecue grill place right next door.
With the pink
pink pig. Yeah, exactly.
Course, yeah, a local icon.
Yeah, the name escapes me, but I think everybody knows the pink pig.
Yes.
From what I understand, those are the only 2 buildings. They were the first commercial buildings in the city of Thousand Oaks, and those are the only 2 buildings that have those commercial basements. And before, obviously, they said you can't quite do that anymore. So taking advantage of the fact that that was grandfathered in, I knew that I visited that space so long ago with a brewery I had been working with, Hand Brewed Beer. They're based in Chatsworth. They were looking for possibly a secondary tasting room, and I was one of the early investors. I mean, this was kind of coming out of law school. I was one of the early investors in that, and so we looked at the space a long time ago for a possible tasting room, and I thought it'd be kind of a fun. I always remember there's a basement, and I said, "What can you do with a basement?" To me, it was like evoking a speakeasy component and kind of thinking about nightlife and leaning back on who I was and how I grew up. I grew up going to Chicago a bunch. And the bars out there are brick and metal, and there's basements everywhere. It's the Midwest, and just to me, it seemed like, man, if we could do something really cool in that downstairs area, that would be, that could be a game changer for Thousand Oaks and cocktails and really up the development of like what Thousand Oaks Boulevard is supposed to be.
It's so smart. And it is interesting. And I'm curious on your take on this. There are a lot of incredible breweries around here, and very few, if at all, more than Oak and Iron cocktail bars. So smart to sort of, go a different direction. Is there a reason our breweries, like, quote unquote, easier to start from as a drinking establishment, or was that really just maybe what the more consumers are looking for, breweries versus cocktail bars?
Yeah, I mean, and actually all of that went into kind of how we ended up pivoting and I know you had touched on it in, I think, your first episode regarding ABC licenses and alcohol licenses. And so there is
Luis from Mouthful shared the lottery system and how, it's not a guaranteed process, and there's very few spots.
Yep, that's exactly it. And that's from a restaurant perspective. There's two main restaurant alcohol licenses and directions you can go if you have a food component. Is kind of the beer wine license, which is called the Type 41. It requires you to sell food along with the beer and wine. Those are technically, they are easier to get. The 47 licenses are the full bar. So when you think of really any of the big restaurants around town, I'll use Paul Martin's as an example. They have a 47 license. Breweries have a whole different kind of system. They have a Type 23 license, and a Type 23 license essentially is a microbrewer permit, and it allows you can go two different directions with that license. You can sell food, but you don't necessarily have to sell food. And so from a startup perspective, it was attractive to us because, and I think that's how California did it very smart in their licensing and with breweries, is that you could have all these breweries kind of pop up, have these tasting rooms, these meeting places pop up, and they don't have to have a food component, but there's of course, the added expense of actually the brewing equipment involved. So to start a brewery, I mean, it's expensive to getting all your bright tanks and, I mean, just everything that you need to brew beer. And that was all kind of built into our original business model. When we pivoted, we knew we actually wanted to go into we like the space that we were in now, that we ended up going with now.
Was there something in there before?
That space, because, I mean, of its history, has been everything from a child's clothing store. When we kind of ripped open all the, you could kind of see like classic Egyptian hieroglyphics of like what it was before. I mean, each layer of wall you took off was just another history lesson about what was there. It was a child's clothing store. It had been the county supervisor's office for a little bit. And we've had a lot of people come through Oak and Iron. They actually would tell us stories about, I've been in this building before when it was apparently
I love that.
It was a tattoo shop before we got it. Children's clothing store, county supervisor's office. the top level at one point was a antique store or some kind of like, I think it was like an antique store, but the basement was a musician studio. So you could record music there. And I remember we had somebody came through Oak and Iron that told us once he recorded a whole studio session down there and was so happy with it. Then the next day, the antique owner came downstairs and yelled because he had the bass up so high. He apparently had knocked over a bunch of paintings and vases and just all sorts. It caused a bunch of damage upstairs. But with each kind of person that comes in there that has the history of Thousand Oaks, it's funny to hear them say, "Oh, I used to come here when."
Wow.
I think it was a sub. No, that was actually what Badass Tacos is now. It used to be a hot dog stand and then a sub shop, and I mean each one of those businesses
For such a small, like little strip mall area, it's interesting to hear that there was so much history in there.
Yeah, I mean it's when I say it was the first commercial building, it really was the first one of the first commercial buildings in the city, and I'm sure you could go back and look, but it's been a long process with all those tenants in there. So we originally had planned on the brewery because you didn't need a food component. We knew we didn't want necessarily to have build out a kitchen and go through all that added expense. So when we pivoted, we originally were going to do food. We wanted to do kind of small bites. I mean, the original business plan was to really do kind of small bite charcuterie options and things that wouldn't necessarily require a full kitchen build out. Unfortunately, we didn't look at the county health department though. So we ended up going for a type 47 or a full restaurant license to be able to do food. And, that also allows under 21 to join us. Didn't look at the county health department, ended up, that was a lesson that cost us 6 months at least in development of the space. Because the county health department came in, they go, okay, well, you need X, Y, and Z and sinks and this and that. And we looked around our kitchen and went, well, that would be literally wall to wall sinks. I mean, you just wouldn't have any space. It just would be a big sink.
Yeah. The square footage in there is not a lot.
The square footage in there is not a lot. And, it was frustrating to hear, but what we ended up having to do is we went back to the ABC and we had to pivot once again to a type 48 license, which is full alcohol, just you're over 21 and there's no food component, which presented issues then for the city because the ABC in turn told us, hey, we're more than happy to give you this license, but cities throughout California are not granting. They don't want bars. They want restaurants. They don't want bars because bars are seedy and so walking out of the ABC office, we went, okay, well, here's another hurdle that we have to cross. So that was good. We worked, I'm thankful for the city of Thousand Oaks and I'm thankful for the Boulevard specific plan. And I think it's an important kind of takeaway is learn any kind of business and starting a business. It's learn where you're truly going to go. Is there a specific plan? Is there anything in place that would kind of make things easier for you, one location over the other? But for that Boulevard specific plan and that kind of commitment by the city and the city council to want nightlife there, I mean, I don't think Oak and Iron would even exist today. Because I mean, I remember going to the hearing then with the city council, and at the time, it was kind of granted to us. This is my words. I mean, I think if you ask the city, they wouldn't tell you this, but it was definitely granted to us on, hey, we'll go ahead and let you open, but we're going to watch you and just kind of see, just to make sure that you're not turning into a new seedy bar and going to cause problems on the boulevard. And that actually that warning helped us kind of define the concept then.
I was just going to ask that inform the style of bar that you are.
100%. 100%. Because, then when we went back and thought, we go, okay, we talked to a lot of people in the area. They don't want to leave, go to the West Side. They don't want to go out to LA. They want okay, well, what is the West Side? The West Side is kind of these upper echelon, great craft cocktails and cocktail bars. And we, um, we kind of define that concept then based on the fact of, well, I think you could, I mean, best way to call it is kind of price out that riffraff where it's not it's not a $3 beers
You're
and
not going for well drinks or
you're not
something.
going for well drinks. Yeah, you're not going for gin and tonics and rum and cokes and
Which
all
has
of
its
those.
place, but
Oh,
definitely
100%.
is. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I've had a gin and tonic or two in my day, so
Right.
I'm not gonna deny that's how you get through college. But it's it was one of those where we basically, it helped us define who we are. And, from the beginning, then we went and made a commitment to being a craft cocktail bar that is, really trying to press the envelope, press, the bounds of what craft cocktails can be and play with flavors. And, and I mean, I think a perfect example of that is the Smoky Edward, which we've had on display since, on the menu since day one, and probably never going to take it off. I can imagine the operators now are not going to take that off. But it was a perfect.
You can't go into Oak and Iron without seeing the reveal of that. I feel like at least one person in there is ordering one
at all times, which,
yes.
Again, but that's kind of it comes back to really the Woodranch and the hospitality that I learned was, if you give that great service, if you give them a show and a presentation, and because when you think about hospitality, right, and you think about each one of the guests that come through Oak and Iron, or each one of the guests that go to any one of the great bars and restaurants we have in the Conejo Valley, you're going with friends, you're going with family, you're going to celebrate, you're going to create memories, right? And that's our job. Our job is to help you create those memories, in which you can, then take away and remember that, oh, I had my 40th birthday dinner at this place and it was memorable because they did X, Y, and Z, and I'll never forget and I'll always come back.
Well, I think it's an interesting point because there are so few, not few, but there, especially when it comes to a cocktail bar, there are very few in the area. So it is probably not somewhere people are going every night. Like if you're in New York City, there's a million bars, but here there's, few relatively. So you have to have it feel special, because if you're going out, you're actually like going there for a reason, not just to like casually go and hang out at a bar. At least that's my perception of it.
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And that's what kind of led to an important aspect of how, when I was there and operating, we ran the business, which was to collaborate with other businesses in the Conejo Valley to benefit both. Very early on with Oak and Iron, we committed to partnering with local Conejo Valley businesses, because we looked at the fact that, for one, we didn't have food. But we knew, as part of it, like a hospitality component, people are very used to going somewhere, and when they're going out to have drinks or just meet up, is they like to have a food component. The city actually, had made that suggestion to us as well, as why don't you partner or try to work at food trucks, something in there also to get a food component going. And that actually led to us starting our whiskey tastings and our educational spirit tastings, which provided a whole different kind of targeted audience of spirit lovers around the Conejo Valley who came, and we began pairing them with local products from local businesses. Newbury Candy, which is somebody who's definitely worth talking to if you haven't already, or at least on your list. John over there, he's great, and he was actually one of our most successful tastings we've ever had, which was we did a Valentine's Day bourbon and chocolate tasting.
Smart.
Where we went and collaborated, and we had Basil Hayden bourbon, different Basil Hayden bourbons, and he went out and made whatever chocolate he wanted to that kind of compared it. And we were able to buy, I think we bought close to 75 or 80 boxes from him, which, to me, economic development wise, it's like you're keeping your money local, you're pumping it right back into another local business who in turn is going to keep their money local. And it was a great collaboration at the time, because that was also, I don't remember, right in the time where somebody had driven their car through his
I
front.
do. I was just going to say that my job office is basically across the street, and I remember that. That was so sad.
That was, yeah, it was a bad situation to be in. I actually called him and I said, if you guys want to use, I don't have a great kitchen,
Yeah.
but I said, if you guys want to use our walk-in or just store stuff, or, it's like one business, I just always take the business philosophy of, we should be helping each other, and we're all in this trying to make it. And it's hard to run a small business in California.
Yeah.
And we should make it a little bit easier and realize that we're not all in competition against one another, but let's see if we can collaborate and bring what we benefit to the table and what we bring to the table, and see how people enjoy it. So
I think that's a fantastic approach, and fully like symbiotic. We're all tides rise. Is that, I always forget the phrase of that one, but everybody, we're all trying to do our best. So why not support each other?
exactly.
What year did Oak and Iron open?
April 2019, because
Okay.
we like to do that right before COVID.
I guess you had a year head start, at least, is the best part. How, I guess, if we have to touch on that, how did that impact the business and how you approach things?
Well, it was very, we had to shut down April, like everybody else.
Yes.
And talk about another pivot before you're even a year old. It's the website we had up originally, we didn't have even the ability to sell anything on there. So, it was like the first weekend we were closed, I sat and bought a whole nother domain and set up a Squarespace or a Square website in a weekend. And it was super makeshift. And, we just, because we had the ability to sell cocktails and in collaboration with food, and at the time it was working with Badass Tacos again, because you had to sell food with to-go cocktails.
Okay, I didn't realize that was part of the specification with that rule.
It went back and forth. Originally it was, if I remember right, it's okay to sell to-go cocktails, and then the ABC and the state came in. They said, well, actually, we need it with a food component, and so it was always keeping us on our toes as to what we could and could not sell. But during COVID, it was like every Friday I was down there with Paul Jones, who was our original kind of head mixologist, and we produced anything. He had a fresh rotating menu that he always came up with, and we just bought as many bottles as possible, and plastic and glass, and but you want to talk about community, and you want to talk about community coming together to help small businesses, and I'm incredibly appreciative. At the time I saw most of the city council came through, and representatives from the city, and people bought, and small businesses bought. Everybody was just helping one another. And, that's where I even went out and started helping other businesses who were confused about the COVID loans and what was PPP and the program. And I just, it's one of those where you grab a notebook and pick up your pen, you use your law degree, and you go and you help other businesses figure out how to save what they've built and worked so hard for in a time when everybody was struggling. And for me, it was just all about collaboration and making it work.
So would you say, that the Conejo Valley is a good place for small businesses?
I would. And it comes back to, because the difficulties in running a small business don't necessarily come from the Conejo Valley. They come from Sacramento. They come from federal regulations. They come from taxes and just everything else that you pay outside of running a business. The Conejo Valley is this is a small town atmosphere in Southern California, in terms of people know one another, people support one another, people appreciate, and I'm grateful for every single person that's come to Oak and Iron and supported us along the way. It is a good business, and it comes also down to, we have a fantastic Chamber of Commerce. Danielle Borgia at the Conejo Valley Chamber is just such a fantastic supporter of our local businesses. And they've built truly a unique chamber that wants to help and support and collaborate and do whatever they can to make businesses work. And I'm privileged, I should say it, I'm privileged to be on the board. I joined the board of directors this past year, and something I've wanted to do for a long time, in part because of how well Danielle and her team over there operate the chamber and like what they can do for businesses across the Conejo Valley.
Wow, that's fantastic. I've had a little bit of interaction with them, and I appreciate what they do with the emerging leaders group, and I think that they seem to be really supportive and encouraging of that, which is fantastic. What would you say has been the biggest challenge with starting Oak and Iron? And I'd love to hear, I know, you've moved on to other things at this point, but what was sort of one of the biggest challenges you experienced with it?
Well, and it actually kind of speaks of what I'm passionate about and working on now is making the startup process a little bit easier for businesses, especially the businesses that have to go out and get some kind of regulation or regulatory license or something, beyond just like a business license. Even some of your previous guests kind of spoke to it. But I'm passionate about, and I wish, looking back, that government agencies would take a second and really look at how can we explain what we need from small businesses easier. And something I'm working on now is hope that, we can get some county health department reform and make that process a little bit easier, because I've heard, and I think maybe some future guests will touch on it possibly. The health department has been, it's good and bad. They serve a great function, an important function. But they can make the process a little bit easier and let businesses know exactly what they're looking for. And it's my hope to collaborate with them and collaborate with maybe the county supervisor or whoever wants to be involved through the chamber to help those businesses to get those documents, get that understanding. Because you're talking 3 or 4 months setback if you don't do it right the first time. And knowing small businesses and how tight those margins are and how tight they run, it's difficult for many businesses if they get set back. There've been a few, and I won't get into specific names or anything, but there's been a few restaurants and small businesses that have opened and shut very quickly in Thousand Oaks. In part, they were just set back by operational issues, but even getting through the door and getting open day one is they had some setbacks based on they didn't understand the regulations and the process. And through my law firm that I operate on my own, I'm open to always collaborating with businesses and helping explain that and get answers and help them ask the right questions so that we can get them open. So that they don't have to pay, 3 or 4 months extra rent without a dime of revenue coming through.
Sure. Like speed to opening is important when you're a small business, and especially I imagine with a restaurant or bar. Yeah. So now you're consulting specifically on those types of topics.
Yeah. I part of the reason, part of the reason I walked away from Oak and Iron is just, I felt like I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish with it. And Oak and Iron, for me, it was a love affair throughout the entire process, and I love that business, more than I'll ever let anybody know. But it's just one of those where I took it as far as I can. I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, which was getting nightlife on Thousand Oaks Boulevard. I think we've seen some other businesses pop up. Inspired by us as a result of us, saying that it's okay to, open kind of the craft cocktail revolution here in the Conejo Valley. And it just was one of those where it's time to move on. And when I look back, and I'm always just of the belief of if you're not having fun while you do it, what are you doing? If you can't get something from it and get something as a takeaway from it, then it's probably best to look elsewhere and kind of walk away. And, at the time I had like I said, I had crossed those goals and checked those boxes. But when I thought about what I love, and what I love doing is helping small businesses grow, and, bringing some of these, helping people bring ideas to fruition and help them achieve their dreams. It's like, call it being part of a lawyer. I mean, a lawyer, you're an advocate, and this is a different way to kind of be an advocate on behalf of small businesses.
And you have experience on both sides of it. So I'm sure that adds a lot of value. What are you most proud of?
For me, I mean, it's kind of a real personal answer. I mean, for me, they say opening a small business is an incredibly difficult thing to do, and being an entrepreneur is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And they're 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's taking that first step and doing it.
Sure.
I mean, how many of us have ideas that we're sitting on at home, and you never get to day one? And for me, like, day one, it could be, you want to write a book, you want to do this. It's like, put something on the page, and it's probably the worst thing you've ever written, but you did it.
Sure. Yeah.
And taking that first step for me is it's a difficult leap. But I also thought back to moving to LA by myself at 18, and it's like I did the hard things. And I love challenges and new challenges. And for me, leaving Oak and Iron was difficult. Starting Oak and Iron was difficult, but I'm on to helping other businesses and taking new leaps. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful and proud.
Are you at all still using your studies of film? Does that come into play?
It does, but not. It does, but in a different way. I call it. I mean, it's storytelling. That's what it really is. I mean, you use storytelling to do film. You use storytelling to be a lawyer, and you're telling the story of your client and your client's case. You're storytelling in the cocktail and hospitality industry. It's and what I most love doing, and what I've got kind of working on now, is I love the events that we did at Oak and Iron, because anybody who's ever joined us downstairs for one of our tasting events, I would say the same thing every single time, and I apologize it got so repetitive. But what I love about the spirit industry is spirits and wine and anything people produce is there's a story behind every bottle. And it comes down to, how do you, my job was to create an environment where that story could be told. And, I think we had a tasting with Uncle Nearest, Nearest.
Okay.
It's a bourbon that, when you hear about the story, it's one of the first African American distillers in the United States. First African American, and to this day, it's an African American owned business. But then you dive a little deeper and you learn that, Jack Daniels, we all know Jack.
Yes.
Jack Daniels actually learned everything from Uncle Nearest.
Wow.
And you go, oh, so why wasn't Uncle Nearest's story being told a lot sooner and on a grander scale than Jack Daniels? Is because you go back and you learn the history and you go, whoa, Jack kind of took everything and just went off and made a business, and good for them. They're successful, but there's so many stories that have not been told behind the bottle, and there's so many great companies popping up around Ventura County that have great stories behind the bottle about using local produce, or they have some kind of local connection. Among them, Ventura Spirits, which is probably a fantastic company. It was one of our first collaborators that we used at Oak and Iron. You got a lot of passionate people that are in this industry. So yes, I'm still using my filmmaking. It's just in a different way. It's telling other people's stories like you would in film. It's finding ways to tell, like Uncle Nearest, and tell that story, and teach people something they may not have known before they walked in that day.
I love that. And it is nice that you can look back and see the commonality, the thread through it, and that you're able to still put that passion into play. Let's go to our rapid fire questions. So these are simple, but speaking of spirits, do you have a favorite?
Favorite spirit. I would say probably any. I like gins, so I
Okay.
don't have a particular. I don't have a particular one. Probably. I don't know. There's so many out of California right now, which are very, very
Hmm.
cool that use a lot of California kind of herbs and spices and kind of great. Blue Whale Gin is probably one of the ones I've
Oh, I
been.
like their bottles. I've never tried it before. I'm not a gin drinker, but their bottle is beautiful.
Their
It like
bottles, yeah,
sticks
their
in my
bottle's
head.
beautiful, and it
Yes.
really is a cool California spirit, and
Okay.
they're good people behind the bottle too.
Great. Okay. What's your favorite thing to do in the Conejo Valley?
Oh, probably love hiking. Lots of hikes. I've got two kids. They go to school out here in CVUSD, and they love hiking and being outdoors, mountain biking, anything outdoors on the trails is what I'm about.
Do you have a favorite hike? Because I think probably 80% of my guests have said hiking is their favorite activity, which I can agree with. Do you have a favorite one?
I would say take me anywhere in like Wildwood area.
Yes.
But also, I mean, the beauty of Thousand Oaks is in the Conejo Valley, it's a ring of open space. It's like you can just point in any direction and go, there's probably a good hike up there.
Sure. That's
So,
true. Walk in your backyard. I remember when I first discovered a hike that is, a 5-minute walk from where I live. And wow, this is incredible. It's a true hike and it's right here. So it's very special. Okay. What kind of advice would you give to first time entrepreneurs?
um, probably it's called you want to get past the business plan because obviously that's the boring part is putting down your dream and your vision and your goals all on paper. But, um, you know, I think it's the most important document you're ever going to
Hmm.
make because it's, especially in the hospitality industry, it sets your standards for how you're going to operate your business and what you want your business to accomplish. So I would take extra time and extra special time on the business plan, but also, and I know it hurts a lot of people to say this, but go get a good accountant, go get a good attorney to help you along the way because you can't answer all the questions. LegalZoom isn't going to help you all the way. You need local people who know what they're doing that can really help and be an asset to you. And sorry, I'm going to just give you one more. Um, your lease is probably going to be the most important
Hmm.
document you will also sign because that is a 5-year, probably 5 to 10 year relationship you're going to have with one person. It is a marriage you are committed to. So use those lawyers to make sure you're negotiating the best lease possible.
I think that is fantastic advice. Leverage the resources that are around you. And it sounds like leverage local resources more so than maybe, somebody that's not in this particular region.
Yep.
Excellent. Drew, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and letting us take a peek behind Oak and Iron and also just giving us a broader understanding of kind of like the small business world in the Conejo Valley. This has been really fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That was Drew Pletcher, co-founder of Oak and Iron Cocktail Bar in Thousand Oaks, California. Visit at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram to learn about this week's weekly giveaway. Make sure to subscribe to Conejo Valley Visionaries wherever you listen to podcasts so that you never miss an episode. And follow us at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram to learn more about each guest and enter our weekly giveaways. If you want to share your visionary story on the podcast, send us a DM. We are always open to guest nominations. This episode was produced by Christina Denstead and Justin K. Sloan. Conejo Valley Visionaries is edited by Justin K. Sloan and J. Sloan Productions.